on his name? There it is. You know how he pronounces it? Yeah? Do you know how to pronounce it? Kill? Yeah, Kill, dude. It's a killer name. It's a Kyler name, Kyle. How did it get spelled like that?
Should I go on the mic?
Yeah. Turn the mic on.
My name is spelled this way because it's a combination of my mom and dad's names. It's like Christian and Mabel.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Dude. I love that. Awesome, man. Hey, so for those of you many people in here are not connected to the conflict in Israel, Palestine. But what you're going to do with me is we're going to bring it back home here to the United States. So I want you to, we're going to talk a little bit. And let me ask you this. Does your family own land here in the U.S.? Do you own a house?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, where at? You can just hold the mic up there.
I live in Levittown in Bucks County.
And do you want to own a home?
Hopefully, yes. I think everyone does.
Yeah. We're in the same place, or?
I was probably thinking more of moving to the West Coast just because of the weather. I like it there better.
Yeah, and there are more Filipinos out there too, man. Yeah. So your people. Hey, how about this? How often do you think about American Indians?
I'm gonna be honest, probably not a lot.
What keeps you? What do you think?
I do hear about Indians getting displaced from their homes all the time on social media, but other than that, I don't really think about it that much.
So what do you know about the sociological experience of do you know anything? And if so, what do you know about the sociological experience, the social indicators, economic indicators, et cetera, of American Indians, Native Americans?
I don't really know that much.
Yeah?
To be honest, yeah.
Okay. All right, man. So here, I'm going to walk you through some slides, okay? So this is one of the early maps of the U.S., right? And this is from the mid 1600s, late 1600s, okay? And these are all of the towns. You can recognize this, right? Obviously, it looks a little different because that's Florida here and so on, right? So these are the towns that were mapped out by the initial Europeans who were here, okay? This is all, there's nothing here because there was nothing here. It's just because they hadn't mapped it yet, okay? So go to the next slide. But this is the U.S., right? These are all all this land was lived on by the indigenous people who came down from up here, the Bering Strait. They crossed over from Asia, the Bering Strait, and came down through here. And all the land. So go back one. So the only thing that mattered, the only people who were here were when the Europeans, or down here, the Spanish settled. But otherwise, it's empty, okay? Go forward again. But in fact, all of the land is lived on, including, they just didn't map out Mexico, but the same thing, okay? Now, so it makes me think about land and dispossession in a different kind of way. So let me show you a map. Do you have any idea, do you know what reservations are?
Yeah.
Do you know where they are? Do you have any sense of it? Like what native peoples own in the United States?
I think somewhere in Oklahoma.
Oh, talk in the mic, dude.
Oh, somewhere in Oklahoma. I know there's a reservation there, but other than that, I don't know where else would it be.
And do you have a sense of how reservations got created?
Not too much, no. I didn't really learn about it.
Okay, all right. So listen, go forward one slide. So, here are the main reservation, what are considered to be Indian lands, right? And, there are native peoples all over the United States, right? But these are the reservations. These are the territories that were identified for indigenous Native Americans, American Indians, okay? So that's it right there. So now the question becomes, So go back to one side. So all this land was these people who lived here, and then go forward. And then in the end, they get pushed off onto these small territories here. Okay? That's it. That's what you all get. I mean, you can live among everybody else, but in the end, that's what you get. We're going to take everything, and we're going to give you that. So now the question becomes, okay, so what's going on these lands? What do you think life is like on those lands?
From what I know, they have like their own set of laws because like they're not under the U.S. Are they? I don't think they're under the U.S. government. So from what I see on like social media, I know like some people would go there and like literally like traffic people because like there's no laws there. That's from the most part. That's what I know.
Yeah, no, there are laws there, and there are, but
They're different.
But they're different, yeah, tribal laws, yep. And by the way, there are 574 federally recognized tribes in the U.S., okay? So now, but what's interesting is that you are saying, hey, I want to buy a house, I want to buy land. So can you go back one? So you're going to put, wherever you put your house is on red land, right? It's on land that's been taken from other people, not really that long ago. And then go forward. So you're not going to buy a house here on any of these little red spots. You're not going to buy a house. But anywhere else, you could buy land and buy a house, and it's going to be on other people's land. Now, your family comes from the Philippines, right? So, like, okay, relatively recently, who came? Your parents or your grandparents?
My parents.
Okay, your parents. They came here, and they're, like, showing up on the shores of the U.S. saying, like, okay, we're going to have a start here in the United States, right? And our son Kyle is going to get an education, and so this is going to be great, and he'll have upward mobility, and he will buy land. But now I'm going to walk you through some data of American Indians, okay, on these lands. All right, so let's go to the first one. So first off, Native peoples in the U.S., the highest unemployment, lowest, all those things, okay? Highest overall poverty, highest suicide rates. Okay, let me show you what this looks like in Pine Ridge. Go ahead. So the unemployment rate, 90% on the Pine Ridge Reservation. High school dropout rate, 70%. Life expectancy for women, 52 years, men, 47 years. Okay? Alcoholism affects 80% of families, and population, people who are living below the U.S. federal poverty line, 97%. So wait, so you want to put your house on land that's taken from somebody else. They're squeezed into this, they're not, now these people, this lineage of people are living on this reservation, and that's their lives. And somehow you got to hold that. But Chris, you don't know anything about it, so then you can just kind of go through, right? Just because kind of how it is with us. We don't know, so we just move forward, and life is okay. Let's go to the next one. Here's changes in poverty rates. Now, I don't have the data from 2010, 2020, but in a way I didn't really need it because it hasn't changed that much from 2000. And look at how these poverty rates have just barely, right? Right? Except Pine Ridge has absolutely increased. Okay. Go to the next one. Percent population with at least a high school education. These are adults. Dude, look, with at least a high school education, man. Look at the Navajo res, 25%. Like 25% make it to the high school or like, dude, 25%, man. Like, fuck. Like, how is, so you're gonna put your house, you could go put your house right out, you go and go west, you can go put your house right outside the Navajo reservation. And that's life on the reservation. So how you thought about that?
I didn't really think about it till now that you mention it.
Mm-hmm. Like how, I don't know, like how, dude, first off, don't feel guilty at all, right? Mm-hmm. Don't know what I want to do is I want to get a window into your brain right now. So I want to be scrambling your brain so that you have to somehow manage the ethics and morality of this, whatever it is, right? Because look, I have a house. It's about a mile from campus, right? It's not like I don't have a house, and I wrestle, this is something I wrestle with, and it's my job as a teacher to get us all to wrestle with this stuff. So here, let me show you another one. Here's what I want to say to you about women on the reservation, okay? And women and men on reservations, the way sexual assault and violence is discussed, is talked about. It's the way sexual violence and assault is talked about, it's not if Native women are going to be assaulted. It's when. So when women, empowered women, and I know this from friends who work with women on the res, right? The empowerment groups for women are built not around the possibility of being assaulted by men. It's what to do when it happens.
It's almost like they're sure it's going to happen.
Yeah, because it's so prevalent. And so now I'm thinking about land. I'm thinking about dispossession. And I'm thinking about dispossession of culture. And everywhere I go in this country, everywhere you and I go, you can be in Bucks County, you can be on the West Coast, you can be in State College, everywhere we go, it's stolen land. Like, you know what I mean? It's land taken from somebody. And yet we get on with our lives. Like, we just move on. Like, okay, here it is, right? Like, and you do the thing that you do, which is like, yeah, I'm living my life, I'm gonna get my degree, I'm gonna do this. I do what I do. There are lots of issues that I'm not up on because there's only so much time in the day. And even if I am aware of them, like, okay, but what am I gonna do? Can you open that back up on the women? Yeah, so the 84% highest in the nation, right? And the thing is that most violence, and this is different. Indigenous peoples, Native peoples are the only group for which this is true. The violence committed against them is primarily, overwhelmingly, by people who are not of their group. So most violence committed against black people is by other black people. Most violence committed against white people is by other white people. Most violence committed against Filipino Americans is by other Filipino Americans, right? But that's not true here. So, like, just as a guy, like, as a man, how is
Yeah, like going back into like what I was saying earlier, like how they have like tribal laws. I feel like that plays a big part on like why like non-Native men go into like their reservations and then like commit these crimes because they know they can get away with it.
Yeah. And so, but in the end, right, I think about the history of Native peoples, and this is where history is important. And if you want to think about Israel and Palestine, you have to study history. Like, you cannot start today. You cannot start last month, last year, 10 years ago. You can't start at just the creation of the state of Israel. Like, you really have to dig in. It calls for that. And I think, wow, to understand this, it calls for us to, I don't know, there's a kind of a responsibility that you have taken on, by the way, but you've decided to immigrate here. So you might be Filipino, but once you enter into this culture, the power is asymmetrical because now you've got putting you up against somebody a native person, like it's asymmetrical power. You're a student at Penn State. You're going to graduate and you're probably going to buy a house on red land. And like, oh, you know what I mean? It's like, do you see it like asymmetrical? Like, do you think about that as a Filipino? Because you see yourself, Filipino, you would see yourself as a minority.
Yeah.
And suddenly I'm saying, yeah, you're a minority from one perspective, but from another one, you have a lot of power. How is that?
I just feel like, in all honesty, I don't think I can really do much about it.
You don't have to do anything. Yeah, you don't have to do anything. But well, if your head is scrambled a little bit, I think you become a better person because you think about moral and ethical issues in different ways. And also, what's really important, and this is with Michaela here, right? You as a brown person, you're going to be very careful about when you separate yourself from people in the dominant group, in the majority group, right? Like white people, like somehow, there is this moment at which black and brown people feel it's just, when have that oppressed, we talked about oppressed, hey, yeah, so when just to remember, to look in a mirror and say, okay, maybe I'm not that different, I want to show you something else, by the way. So the land, this is the pipeline that was being built coming down from Trans-Canada Pipeline and bringing gas down into the lower 48. And just look at the destruction of the land, man. The land that is sacred to native peoples. In a way, like if I think about the Philippines, right, and I think about indigenous Filipinos. Do you speak Tagalog?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so I think about indigenous Filipinos, and I think about how the land is sacred, and I think, damn, man, that's like, and then go to the next slide. And then these people who are defending the sacred, defending the land, are out there on their own, speaking into the vortex of this empty space to other people who are busy living their lives and not paying attention. Because we can't pay attention to every issue. But when I look at these are the ancestors of the indigenous peoples of the United States. I think, where are their voices, man? Where are their voices? Like there, but where are their voices? No, go ahead.
So what I was gonna say was like, in terms of like the Israel-Palestine conflict, you would see like some Palestinian people coming over to the U.S., but like with like Native Americans, their like numbers are dwindling, right? You would say that? No, it's pretty steady at this point, but yeah. Okay, but go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, but what I was gonna say about that is the reason why most people stay silent about it is because like it's a problem that doesn't really affect them or the people around them, is what I feel.
Mm-hmm. If it doesn't affect us or the people around us, then we don't.
Mm-hmm.
This war does, right? And Israel and Palestine, right? Right now, like, a hospital just got bombed in Gaza.
Yeah.
And they're saying about 500 people died. It doesn't affect you. It affects me because because I have there are a lot of former students who I work with, and I'm like, who are doctors, and I'm like, I know there's some people working at the hospital, man. Students who had dialogues and conversations and facilitated conversations for Social 19 students who so, yeah. Like, what do you think? What do you wish you would hear from me? Like, is there anything that you wish I could say? Like, as an adult in the room, is there anything you wish I could say to help unscramble your brain? A question I could answer for you that would?
So far, not really, no.
Yeah. How much do you think? I don't know. Like as a teacher, when I do this kind of thing with people, I'm really not wanting you to go any one place, okay? I don't want anything to happen. I just want to get you to be a better human. And be a better human by kind of wrestling with some of the things that are really, really important. Because you can't turn your back on stuff. But I don't know if I succeed in that. I don't know. What do you think?
I feel like you succeeded in it because like now you got me like thinking about like the Native American stuff because like that's not really stuff you see in the media. Like defend the sacred. That's probably my first time seeing that.
What's the sacred? What do you think the sacred is?
Probably their land. Like as you showed me, their land was getting demolished.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I showed you wasn't actually their land, that this pipeline went right around one of the reservations, but it still impacts them. Because all the land is sacred, because all the land was their land. And then the people just come in and they just decide to do what they're going to do. Yeah, I don't know, man. I got a question for you. At what point, if you steal something from somebody, and you pass it on to your, like let's say your grandparents stole something, and they passed it on to your parents, and your parents pass it on to you, and the person they stole it from is like now completely out of the picture. At what point in time does that thing become yours?
I don't think it doesn't really become mine if it's stolen.
Well, the land you're going to build your house on is stolen. So at what point in time are you allowed to not think about that?
I guess never.
I don't know. No, I don't know because very few people think about it. We don't think about it. So like, it's a question. If I take your cell phone and I steal it from you and I give it to somebody else and they give it to somebody else and they give it to somebody else, and that person doesn't really know that it's stolen from you, and then someone comes along and says, hey, I'm taking your cell phone. They're like, wait a minute, this is my cell phone, it's mine, right? It was a gift. My friend gave it to me. So I think this is a question, right? At what point in time is it yours? Does something become yours or somebody else's?
I was gonna say something stupid. Say something like, if you kind of like pay for it, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, maybe if you have the power. Here's power is asymmetrical. You have the power. You have citizenship here, right? You have money. You're going to buy the title and the deed for a property. It's going to be yours. And the law is behind you. The law that the white man, right, created, built around their idea of what was just and what was right, which was to put the indigenous peoples on the reservations and take their land and be in their land. So it's like, well, you have that power. So it's like, okay, well, then it's yours, I guess. But this is an issue that's in play all the time. It's an issue that's in play in Israel and Palestine. Like sometimes people would say, hey, why talk about this, or why are we talking about it? Because it's these kinds of things that make us better than what we are. And it's a willingness to wrestle with some of these things that make us, that make the world, that allow us to confront or deal with injustice. Yeah. Dude, awesome, man. Thanks.
All these talk of neutrality, I just wanted to hear from you of where would be the line that you draw of staying neutral and having no principle?
Oh, dude.
Right.
That is the
because I'm
question.
always constantly
Yeah.
accused of having no principle
Yeah,
when
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
trying to stay neutral.
Yeah.
When I personally think I do have a strong sense of principle,
Yeah.
I just try to be neutral. But
Yeah. So here's the thing. There's no neutrality ever, really, right? In a certain sense. And there's, you just do your best. And sometimes the people who are most capable of doing that are the people that folks really struggle with. Yeah, they really, really struggle with. Yeah. Here, let me throw something else out to you. This is just this is a slide of North America as it would be if there were no states, no cities, this as it would be if native peoples still populated the entire part of North America. So the boundaries are the boundaries of the Blackfoot, the Cree, the Ojibwe, one after another, right? Shoshone, the Ute, the Cheyenne, it can go on and on. So this is what it would look like. Now, look at the border with Mexico, right? Here's a picture here's one picture of the border wall between Mexico and the United States. The human beings that we are creating. So this was not, by the way, y'all, this was not built by Trump. This was already there. Here we go. Next slide. Go to another one. Here's another shot of a border wall. Once again, it was not built by the Trump administration. And so here are these walls. Here's another one with lots of graffiti on it. By graffiti in Spanish, graffiti in English. Indigenous Native American peoples are writing graffiti in their own languages. And then I have this shot. Take a look at this. So this is an anti-immigration, pro-border wall rally. Support all the illegals, build the wall nice and tall, assimilate, meaning that anybody who wants to come here, you got to assimilate and be an American in the way that these people think you should be an American, right? So the question I have is, what do you think indigenous Americans, American Indians think about the border wall?
When you showed that map earlier that like separated the tribes and stuff, was that like boundaries that they set, or is that just where they inhabited different places?
It's more, listen, they didn't map out the land, but this is more or less what it would be. And if you go to the other slide, Jeff, not this one, go to the other one that shows all of North America. No, yeah, keep going. Yep, right there. So if you look at this one, there's no border between the U.S. and Mexico, right? And suddenly these Americans want to come along, these United Statesians, they want to come along and they want to build this border wall. What did Native Americans think about? Who's illegal here? Who's illegal? Who's legal? Who's illegal? Bro, Cole, what do you think?
The Mayans.
Well, go ahead. Anyone?
I think the irony of the entire situation is just pretty insane.
How's that?
Just because, we came over, or people came from Europe and just kind of claimed this land as, well, you know what? Like, since the people that are currently living here, the indigenous people are, not up to our standards of, life and society, and we don't really understand, the way that they live their lives. Like, let's just overpower them and take over and force them out. Technically, we were the immigrants coming in, just as like we view immigrants coming over from Mexico and other countries, and it's just so ironic.
Yeah, right. So we and not only we did not understand them. We wanted what they had. We wanted their gold. We wanted their silver, their natural resources. We wanted their land. We wanted it all. And so what we had to do, we got to get rid of them. And so, we're going to push them off the land and kill them. Somebody else, like what? So anyone else have anything they want to add to that? Grant, Cole?
I'd like to add something to it. I think we're making a very unwise assumption in assuming that that in all of these nations that there were not any border disputes, and that these were kind of that in between each nation, it was kind of a fluid things in which it was easy to go to one nation and go to another nation. These were very, many of the nations were very, I don't want to say closed off in a way, but the reason that they formed was because they had very similar ideals. They had very similar features, things like that. And that's kind of how as we've discussed it, kind of how a nation kind of forms, or kind of how a race
Yeah.
or ethnicity forms. I know I'm kind of using race and ethnicity as a little too interchangeably, but I think it's unwise for us to assume that these nations did not have any border disputes or did not
Okay.
have any land disputes between the two.
Okay, so here, dude, awesome for raising that. So first, we're even using the word nations. The nations is a 20th century term. It's a 19th century term that we started to use.
Nation states
We started talking about nation states. So indigenous people, native peoples, nobody around the world talked about nations. We do now just because we do, right? Many of the tribes today have their own passports, they have all sorts of things that they're working with, but legal structures, legal systems. There were border disputes, not borders, because there weren't borders. It's highly, I mean, in some places, I'm sure there were borders, like one side of the river or another, but the border only existed if it was a natural border. But clearly there were disputes. These peoples fought with each other, just like the European tribes fought with each other, African tribes, Asian tribes, everybody fought. People fought. They didn't all just get along, you know? But the issue is, it's sort of like with modern, what we talk about, the chattel or slavery, the slave trade. It's like people took this. There's always been slavery throughout human history. There are more slaves in the world today than at any point in human history. So there's always been slavery. It's just that during the transatlantic slave trade, people took slavery to another level. And so here in the Americas, we took the land grab to another level. And the Europeans that came over, they just took that to another place. So the question is, when, you know, as Annalise was saying, well, you know, you've got people coming over and saying they didn't come over and say, hey, we got to learn the language of these people. We want to assimilate. None of these questions happened. None of that. It was just like, we're going to take this. And then today, when people come, once you get established, and we see this all over the world, right? Once you get established, all the immigrants, when people migrate somewhere, and once they get established, the first thing they do is kind of close the door for other people, because it's like, look, I'm here now. Like, I got to keep you out because I want to keep whatever I have. And so the irony is that here we are with this big movement to build a wall to stop other people from coming in a land that was actually stolen from other people, and on the basis of really the foundation of what would be called a genocide. It's ironic at the very least. So for me anyway, and then Cole, maybe you can respond to this. You have to have, you know, you're going to have borders in the modern world of nation states. In the global arena, we're going to have borders. That's just the nature of life itself. So we're going to have borders, right? But for what I think is, here in the United States, when people are really having conversations and arguing about this question of whether we should have a border wall with Mexico, or, you know, the border with Canada, or whatever the borders are, it's just to have a certain sense of just a respect for the perspective of native peoples, who many of whom directly today see everybody of European ancestry as the illegal, the undocumented, the illegal, who was never told they could come here, and in fact tried to steal stole basically everything, and almost all of whom have a problem with coming in and just erecting these walls to stop these illegals, but nonetheless question that. And I think that for me, there's just kind of that sense of, I don't know what's right or wrong, but I never talk about this issue without thinking about indigenous peoples in the history, and just how just kind of a sense of, just an awareness of that. It does something. Cole, do you have a thought on that?
One thought that I'm thinking about is it's not the first time in human history that like a bunch of people overtook another group of people. Like the Roman Empire, the sun was never supposed to set on the Roman Empire. And I don't, like, if Native Americans today could drive all of us out, I don't know if they would or if they wouldn't. But I think what you said, we can't take back anything we've done, but looking at the modern world today and how we can learn from what we did and try not to make the same mistakes is important.
Or maybe, yeah, I like that. Or maybe just be aware of it, right? Just to have like maybe just not be so mean about it. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Right.
so ungraciously mean. Some people are just, they build the wall big and tall. It's like, oh man, how about, like kick out all the undocumented illegal aliens. All right, good. How about I'll help you pack since you're illegal too, from this other perspective, right? So I'll help you pack and let's get your bags and we'll send you back to Europe or wherever you're from, your people are from. So for me, it's just like a certain awareness of that. So I go to this slide here. Here's this banner, that again, no human being is illegal is what that means. Ningún ser humano es ilegal. It's like no human being is illegal. And it's like, I understand like from the legal, from the bureaucratic statecraft perspective, we can talk about it in some way, but it's just, there is a part of this work that we do and say in a class like Social 19, there's also kind of heart-based, right? And if we don't kind of open to that, we really can continue to commit some really terrible atrocity, just like be mean-spirited about it, for crying out loud. And by the way, let me show you this. This was just like, here is a poster for the Grand Rush for the Indian Territory. So this is a poster in the East, right? Now is the chance to procure a home. This is a 19th century poster about the lands, right? And just like, this is first timer, the richest land, the finest watered land, 15 million acres of land now open for settlement. This is land that was directly stolen from other people. People killed their dead bodies on this land. You know what I mean? And this is it. So you see these posters all over in the eastern part of the United States, right? In the Midwest, as it went further and further, these kinds of things, the grand rush for the land. And like, whoa, this is the date down here is 1879. And it's just like, this is real. This is what it was. It's like, man, it's just is one of these things where you go, God, did this really happen? Yeah, it really happened. Like, I think about just someone coming into my, like, yeah, it really happened. This is how it worked. Right. So here, next slide. Let me just show you this. And then the land, and then indigenous peoples, native peoples being pushed into what is federally recognized reservations. So Chloe, this is where Chloe was down here in Taos. And so here is, it's all these reservations, and it's not the best land. It's the worst land. It's the most problematic land. It's like, you know what I mean? American Indians being pushed into smaller and smaller pieces of land that are like for where they cannot survive. So Chloe, you said you were in New Mexico, right? In Taos?
Yeah. And I also said that I was also in Albuquerque in a museum.
Yeah. So this is, it's just like, oh man. So here, listen, I don't know what the answer is, but well, hang on. Let's just keep going.
For this next part, I just need 2 volunteers to come up and sit with Amin. Hi.
Hi, I'm Hannah. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Luis.
Luis, nice to meet you.
Oh, I get a microphone.
Yeah. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. This is kind of like a little bit like last class, right? So we're gonna have you guys watch a video. We're all gonna watch this video. And Jeff, don't forget the lyrics. You got it. Great. Okay, so some of you, remember, you get as much choice as you want in being able to take off your own shoes and try on someone else's. But for you two, our volunteers, just really, you guys shook hands, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so just with all the stuff I told you, imagine your grandparents went through the reservation period, your parents went through the boarding school era, but you were taught that you're from here. Like, this is your home.
You're now my brother, and you're now my sister. Okay?
Nice. Okay, so you guys are relatives, and let's go ahead and watch this video together. Watch it as if You guys are brothers and sisters, okay? What are you left feeling? What are you left feeling about what your home is? And what's your name again, Hannah?
Yeah.
Hannah and Luis?
I think it kind of makes you feel kind of ashamed of yourself, even though.
You're a native person, right?
Right. So it would, so it would make me feel ashamed of like Americans and the image of what Americans should be now. Like coming in, taking land, supposedly Christians killing people, but being against it themselves, but they're willing to kill for the things that they want, I guess, that aren't necessarily needs but wants.
You're seeing that there's more wants than needs, and you feel ashamed, okay? How about you, Luis? Remember, you're his brother, and you just watched, your history and, some of now.
I think it's funny because one of the images that the video shows is like a scale. And
A what? A scale?
Yeah.
Yeah, the justice
And-
scale.
Yeah, and it's funny because like we start with all these images of like our people, and it almost seems as if the scale has been tipped more towards the needs of the people coming in than the people who were already here. As if the people coming in, as if their needs and their wants, because as Hannah says, it's more of a want than a need, are valued more than of those people who are already here.
Yeah, because Native people are taught you only take what you need, right? You only take what you need, but you're seeing, mass consumption happening. So let's for a moment, actually, Amin, do you want to reply? How do you feel?
I'm raged. I'm like, my heart is beating fast because a lot of people don't realize that it's still happening today. It's still happening today. And sometimes I have to control my emotions because of the work that I do. When I want to just scream out with rage. And that rage is coming from my ancestors who sat in the very same place and prayed for the future generation to still continue to be here with clean water and food for the people, and our culture still alive as human beings. So I got a lot of emotions going on right now.
Thanks for putting that out there. Hannah, you're this Native young woman. What do you want to tell the class? What do you want to tell the class about? What's something you want them to know?
I feel like in that video you saw at the end a man who was a chief, and he, for his people, represented so much and stood up for his people and respected them and wanted what was best for them, not more than they needed, but what they wanted. And the governments today and the leaders today in America don't show that. It's almost as if they don't really care about the people here and the individuals, as long as they're in power and have that power. That's all they want. And it's it makes you feel raged when you look at that. You don't feel like you're important. You don't feel like you're a person anymore, and you don't have someone to stand for you.
Yeah. You might not feel as important. You might not feel as valued in this country. And how about you, Luis? What's something you would say to the class? You're going to say, this is what I want you to know.
I think what I would say is that it comes down to the way you handle things, because even if people came here centuries ago thinking that no one was here and found out that, oops, you're wrong, like there's people who are already established here, I think things would have gone a lot better. And still, like today, they would go a lot better if things were handled with much more empathy. Because, like, we may speak differently, we may dress differently, we may approach and see life in a different way, but we still have the same needs as anyone else, as any of the people in power. Basically, we want happiness for our families and love for our children and a
It's
roof
tr-
over our heads.
It strikes me that you're actually, even though you're hurt yourself or angry yourself, you're actually still wanting to let people know that we're all human beings. That strikes me, because I'd be pissed and I'd just be all about my people, you know? So thank you for that. If there's like one or two images you could pick out from that, whether it was an image of a Native person or the kids in the boarding school, can you pick out one image that like, or gave you a different feeling that was really strong? Go ahead.
I
Hannah.
think, like I said before, the image read at the end, like really, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was like the empowerment in his face or how he looked, but that was a leader that you want to follow and you want to respect. And I think in this country today, there's a leader that doesn't have a lot of respect and a lot of people don't want to follow. And so looking at that, you know, like these people had pride and took pride in somebody that stood for them and stood their wants. And I think the other images that were repeated over and over again were just people laying on the ground dead for no reason, dead because of who they were, and they were at the wrong place at the wrong time, or what was deemed as the wrong place, but it was their right place. And they stood for something they cared about, and we don't get to do that anymore because we get ridiculed for it. And those people died for what they believed in, and our people died for what they believed in, and I think that's powerful to everybody.
Thanks, Hannah. How about you, Omer?
I'd like to add those images that you saw in the wintertime. The one that always hits me is Bigfoot, Chief Bigfoot, and he was laying there frozen. And that's actually a picture of where he was face down, which means that if anybody's in forensics, when you're face down, that means that you were running and you were shot in the back. So a lot of the people in the images that you saw, they were shot in the back. The children were shot in the back. When they wanted to save bullets, they stepped on babies' heads. So that time is from the ghost dance. And so after being forced to practice Christianity, and you take it up and you say, okay, yeah, I see the similarities, rather than seeing the differences right away. You see the similarities. And then saying that you're not worthy enough to be praying to Jesus Christ. So when they did the ghost dance, the cavalry was so afraid that they started shooting people in the middle of winter. Babies, kids, elders. So that's what you see frozen there. They turn them over. That's why the arms are contorted for Bigfoot. But that's what always hits me. And even times I go to sleep and I'll still picture that because I have that connection with our ancestors. So it's hard.
Luis, is there an image that you want to comment on?
I think it was a series of images. I think it showed like a valley and like a spring, and then right after they show like a brand new shopping mall. And it was just, I felt a little upset because it was a little bit of a disrespect to the environment that we have and that we've been fighting for and that we have had for thousands of years, and replacing that with something that we already have plenty of and we don't need. Like,
Clothes?
Like,
What do you mean?
yeah, isn't like, I'm sorry to call you out on this, but isn't like New Jersey the town of malls? Like, don't you have like all around like every corner?
Or shopping centers. I also have a lot of
Like-
shopping centers in DC.
Like, you already have a bunch of malls and places to get your clothes. Like, why do you need another one?
Yeah. Why do we? Why do we? Why do we need another one? I might be shopping online later, you know? But you were saying that image, seeing the shopping mall, made you feel what?
It made me feel upset just because, like, I get it. Maybe we need one or two, like, every now and then because of, like, needs, but you don't need to, like, just because it's like nature untouched doesn't give you the right to go in and plunder and destroy it and just because you can. Just because you can physically doesn't mean you should.
Right, Hannah, were you gonna say something?
I just think what you said too about the images of like the gorgeous valley, like everyone probably looked at and was like, wow. And then you see the mall. I think people in America are constantly traveling, like retweeting things like, oh, this place has this, like these beautiful mountains, this, like we had that. We had that stuff too, but it's gone. Like it's gone because of killing people who were preserving those lands. And now, you know, like a beautiful landscape is taken so much for granted and we have to travel to go see it when like we had that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So, okay, step back out of you're no longer brothers and sisters, but is there a question you want to ask? Is there a question you want to ask Amin, though, about any of the issues we talked about, or just something you're wondering? It's like your one time, everything you were afraid to ask a native.
I guess I have relatives, not like first from Rouge or anything, but they still live in New Mexico, like part of like Pueblo Indians and things like that.
Nice.
And I guess my culture was I was never cultured about it because it was taken away, it was Americanized, as a lot of this stuff was. But I see a lot of issues today, it's always about like black and white, I guess, and we kind of like disregard all of the other issues that could be going on, like this being one of the largest genocides. Like my Baba is Ukrainian, and when she came here, they like failed her in school because she couldn't spell her last name, and she was in first grade. They Americanized her right away. And the Russians created one of the other biggest genocides, more so than the Holocaust here, like killing Ukrainians, and like that's still going on.
Yeah.
And so I guess like my question
Totally.
to you would be, how do you feel that like everything in America, like the problems just seem to be like so black and white, not taking away that issue at all, but how do you think that makes you feel that nobody is really like paying attention, nobody's listening to how the Native Americans feel?
I think that there are a good amount of people out there that do and want to listen. So let's not, say that no one is listening. But I think the rest of the mainstream people that watch that mainstream media are caught up in the smoke and mirrors. So they're not going to see that. Whereas someone who is a little bit more connected will see something like that and will want to talk about that because I can just feel a lot of guilt out there right now. I can feel that. And that's not I can feel a lot of the guilt out there. And that's not what it's about right now. It's about moving forward in a productive way, not sweeping something under the carpet, but understanding that now you see those reservations of ours, but one thing that you may not realize, or some of you may realize, is that it's going to be one whole reservation, It's becoming one whole reservation, slowly and secretly becoming one reservation where it'll be like cattle. Everyone's going to be like cattle. So not to get too in-depth with it or debate over it, but those that know and can share later. So.
Do you want to ask a question, Luis?
Sure. So I grew up in Puerto Rico, and all the natives that we had, they were killed or they fled. So we have no natives. So I've never had a conversation with a Native American person before. So for a person like me who has little to no knowledge of the cultural background of your people, how would it be sensible to straight up ask questions about traditions or headdress or growing your hair? Would it be silly, or would you take offense in that, or?
It's more about educating. That's what it comes down to, because where some of the things that you did pull up are from a Hollywood vision of what the identity of what Indians look like. And, that's something that people have to move away from because that's actually not a good thing. You had mentioned about Puerto Rico. I have a lot of friends that are from there that people were taught in history that all the correct term is Arawak. Arawak people, also known in English as Taino, they still are around. So they were never extinct. But the language was driven out of them so much that now they only speak Spanish. So Spanish is a colonized language from overseas. So that's actually not an indigenous language to the South. So.
Yeah. So, and it's cool that you hit on education. And if you guys have more questions, Amin will be around later, but I just wanted to thank you for coming up and like sharing some of your story, and my love out to your family.
It was very nice meeting you.
Yeah. Yeah. Hope they're okay. Yeah. So thanks.
I do want to share,
So you can,
when people come over here, they, 500 plus years ago, you came over here as a refugee because the way that you wanted to practice your religion, you couldn't. So those that know the history know what I'm talking about. And so when you came over here, the freedom of religion. Well, what also happened was we had our religion taken away. It was actually outlawed. It was illegal. We could be imprisoned, raped, killed, murdered, everything under the sun, just until 1979. 1979 is when we were legally able to practice our religion without being
suffering
imprisoned.
the consequences. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we did have elders that were underground carrying on these traditions so that when the time came, we could still preserve. So even after all this time, we're still here.
So with that,
the Indian problem.
the Indian problem is also their spirituality.